Hello and welcome to a special Redskins schedule edition of Post Sports Live. I'm joined in the studio by Redskins editor Keith McMillan and the newest member of the DC Sports Blog team, Scott Allen. Scott, welcome to Post Sports Live.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us, guys. I wanted to get right to it. First question, Keith. What are your initial takeaways from the Redskins schedule release?
I think it's a pretty favorable schedule. You know, fans have to like it. The opening games and some of the matchups you have, obviously the primetime games. But I think the main initial takeaways for me are finishing with those 3 division games, which I think should be policy across the league. I think every division should do it because that way, even if you're out of the hunt, you know, those games are still of interest. And just the teams that you always seem to end up on the Redskins schedule. This is going to be the 5th consecutive year they played the Vikings in the regular season. They always seem to play Tampa Bay, whether it's regular season, preseason, or even that one playoff matchup they had. And then and the Rams always seem to end up on the schedule as well. I think they played 7 times in a row between 05 and 2012, and then they didn't play last season, but the Rams are back on the schedule.
That's what happens when you finish last in divisions. What do you got, Scott?
The thing that jumped out at me right away was the 3 primetime games for a team that went 3-13 last year.
Right.
Obviously, the Redskins always a big draw, Robert Griffin III. But the most surprising part of that is that everyone's predicting that Deshaun Jackson's return to Philly might be the Monday night opener or a Sunday night game. It's being played 1 o'clock on a Sunday.
Right.
Same thing for Luck and Griffin's first regular season matchup.
Yeah, you would think that the primetime games they get would feature some of those matchups, but interesting that they haven't. All right, let's get right to some questions. Most intriguing divisional matchup, Keith, who do you got?
Well, I thought it was going to be a Monday night game or a Sunday night game in the first 2 weeks of the season. It is early in the season, but it's that first game at Philadelphia with Deshaun Jackson, you know, jumping from the Eagles to the Redskins, going back to Philadelphia for the first time. Most Redskins fans can remember the first time Donovan McNabb went back to Philadelphia, even though that wasn't a memorable era for Redskins fans. That first game was a pretty satisfying day. That game was a 17-12 game, came down to a Eagles Hail Mary in the end zone that they dropped. So, and then I think most people remember that scene of McNabb gloating in the locker room. So similar possibilities with Deshaun Jackson there. There's also some history on Monday night for him playing for the Eagles against the Redskins.
Right.
So, if Redskins fans are lucky, he'll make some of those kind of plays against the Eagles.
So you got Week 3 at Philly. What do you got, Scott?
Yeah, I think that's the game that everybody circled, but I'm also looking forward to Week 8 at Dallas on a Monday night. It seemed, as a kid, it seemed Dallas and Washington played every single year on Monday night, 91 to 93. Right. Some great Monday night games. Obviously, some history in Dallas with the Monday Night Miracle, Brunell, Tomas. But this is only the first time since 2000, second time since 2005 that the Cowboys and Redskins will go at it on a Monday. So I'm looking forward to that one.
I would say the Dallas game, the last game of the year, obviously 2 years ago, that game was for the division, for the playoffs. But it's hard. I think that Week 4 game, the Thursday nighter in primetime against the Giants, is going to be a pivotal game for this team. They have a relatively soft schedule to start. That's going to be one of those games that sort of separates them from being a contender or a pretender, I think, to use a cliche. Sorry. All right, most intriguing non-divisional matchup, Keith. Who do you got?
It's got to be Seattle coming back to FedEx Field for the first time since that 2012 playoff game. That was the playoff game, of course, where Robert Griffin hurt his knee and set the franchise. You know, the history of what happened in 2013 changed the whole trajectory of the franchise. You know, not just that game that they lost, but it changed all of 2013, and maybe will have an effect lingering into this season. Plus, you have the opportunity to see the Super Bowl champions come to Landover, and I think, you know, the way the Redskins rebuilt this receiving core over this offseason, by adding Jackson, by adding Andre Roberts to Pierre Garçon, now you have 3 pretty good receivers, a really good tight end, potentially in Jordan Reed, going against the best secondary in football, led by Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Earl Thomas. So that should be a real fun game.
And what I was telling Scott before, Redskins fans should avoid all the pregame hype for that because it's going to be cringe-worthy television going back to that playoff game and that injury from RG3. What's your most intriguing non-divisional matchup?
I'm going to go Week 13 at Indy. Like I said before, Luck and Griffin, number 1 and number 2 picks from the 2012 draft, going against each other for the first time in the regular season, at least.
Right.
There were T-shirts and all sorts of hype for that preseason matchup 2 years ago. So, if you thought Harper and Trout comparisons were bad this past week, I think that the hype train has already started for Luck and Griffin on week 13.
And if both teams are in the playoff hunt, it'll be even worse. Yeah. Absolutely. What do you have for your toughest stretch, Keith, in the schedule?
I look at the schedule, and it's hard to predict, obviously, this far in advance. But I don't see a real tough stretch. I think the toughest two games are at San Francisco and at Indianapolis at the end of November. And you probably you go down the schedule. Those are two that you don't circle as wins. And then I guess coming back off that game, if you don't win against the Rams, then you're trying to finish out the season with three division opponents, three teams that have no problem getting up for the Redskins. So I think that two-game stretch at San Francisco, at Indy is probably the toughest.
That's a tough back-to-back, both on the road. Who do you guys got?
Yeah, those two games could be the toughest back-to-back in the league for any team. I'm going to go weeks 3 to 6. I mean, you start with the game at Philadelphia, Deshaun Jackson's return, an emotional game, and then you got to come back on a short week on a Thursday night against the Giants. Then you've got 10 days to prepare for Seattle, and the Redskins probably need all 10 days.
Right.
And then you follow that up on a short week, a West Coast trip to Arizona, a team that won 10 games last year. So I think after that 4-game stretch, we could have a pretty good idea of what this Washington team could be.
Yeah, and I mean, two after that, Tennessee is one of those games that you might circle as a win on the schedule, but then they follow that up with that Dallas game on Monday night. Right. That's a tough stretch, weeks 3 through, 7 or 8 there. All right, let's go to the easiest stretch on paper. Keith, who do you got?
Well, I think it's right out of the gate at Houston, a team that's got a brand new coach, just like the Redskins do, potentially a brand new, in fact, most likely a brand new quarterback, unless Case Keenum or T.J. Yates ends up being the starter. And then you come home against Jacksonville, a team that doesn't have a whole lot of talent. So I think right out of the gate, those two games, and then the chance to go to Philadelphia again, a game they won't have any trouble getting up for.
Right.
And if they're 2-0 at that point, if they win both of those two games, they'll be riding high, I think, going into Philly for that game. So that opening stretch could be pretty easy. I also think there's a stretch here in the middle, which if they're going to be a playoff contender, they have to do well pretty much from Tennessee, Dallas, Minnesota, the bye week, and then Tampa Bay. You probably got to get at least 3 wins out of that. And another thing I think is really favorable is almost having 2 bye weeks. You have the week off on November 9th between the Minnesota and the Tampa Bay game, but then play a Thursday game and then don't play again until Monday between the Giants and Seattle. So that's almost like having
a week,
like a half 11-day break.
Right. Yeah, right. Good point. Oh, what's yours, Scott?
This might sound a little bit crazy for a team that didn't win a single divisional game last year, but I'm going to go with the final 4 games of the season. Home against St. Louis, then they go to New York to play the Giants, and then home against Philly and Dallas. Sets up well. I mean, who knows if the Redskins are in the hunt at this point, but who knows if Philly and Dallas and New York are playing for anything either.
Right.
I think we remember that. Try to forget that game at New York last year where both teams had nothing to play for.
In the drizzle, the cold drizzle.
But I mean, if Washington's in the hunt at this point, I think 3 of 4 at home to close it out with some key divisional games could be okay for the Skins.
All right, let's end on the predictions for the record. What do you got, Keith, for the Redskins? I know we're not going to go game by game, but what do you have for their 16-game record?
I think it's a sucker bet to try to go game by game this time of the year. You think, the Rams.
Come on, it's late April. You don't know yet.
But you look at the Rams might end up being good, or somebody might have an injury, they might end up being bad. But record prediction, I'll go 9-7. I don't think these Redskins were quite. They weren't a 3-13 roster last year. They sort of kind of mailed it in after losing the Minnesota and the Eagles game last year, and they clearly mailed it in the last 3 games. So I don't think they were quite as bad as their record suggests.
Okay.
And they filled a lot of holes in the offseason. So I'll go 9-7. I think they'll be in the hunt and maybe finish a game or 2 short of division title.
All right, yours, Scott.
I'm going to go a little less bold than that. I'm going to do the cop out and say 8-8, which I think in the NFC East may be good enough to be in the hunt in that final stretch. I did go game by game last night, or at least tried to. It's a futile exercise, but I came up with 8-8. Some games that look like obvious wins, some games that look like obvious losses, but like you said, it's April, so I'll say 8-8.
You never know. Yeah, I'm going to go with you, Keith, 9-7. It seems really bold after a 3-13 campaign. We're all 3 of us collectively have the 6 games, 17 games over where they were last year, and improving if you add them up in aggregate. I think that's a little bold, but hey, you know what? It's time to be excited. The winners of the offseason, right? That's what the Redskins do.
That is what the
why not be
Redskins
bold?
do.
These are bold predictions. All right. Well, thank you to Keith. Thank you to Scott. Thanks for joining us on this special edition of Post Sports Live, Redskins Schedule Edition.